Deep thought begins where comfort ends. Imagine this. You are in a room full of people. Everyone is talking at the same time, but no one is really saying anything profound. Empty laughter, recycled opinions, phrases copied from a meme or some random headline. In the middle of all that noise, have you ever wondered why it seems like we think less, feel less, and understand less every day? We live in the age of infinite information. You can access in seconds all the wisdom accumulated by centuries of humanity, and yet the paradox is brutal. We are becoming more superficial, more distracted, and in many cases, more manipulable. How is it possible that in a world with so much knowledge, we are surrounded by so much ignorance? Perhaps you have already noticed it. Increasingly empty conversations, debates reduced to shouting and labels. Young people who know more about an influencer's life than about their own history. The noise grows, but meaning fades. And the worst part is that many accept it as if it were normal. But here is the uncomfortable question. Why is society becoming increasingly stupid? Who benefits from this decline of wisdom? And most importantly, what can you and I do to not be swept away by this wave of collective mediocrity? Stay until the end of this video because I am going to reveal to you not only the deep causes of this phenomenon, but also the keys to resist it. And I warn you, what you are about to discover may make you uncomfortable because it will force you to look head-on at how you consume information, how you think, and how you live every day. Society seems to be sinking into a tide of superficiality, but there is still a path for those who dare to think for themselves. A difficult, uncomfortable, and lonely path, but also the only one that can restore the clarity we have lost. So accompany me, because what you are about to hear could forever change the way you understand culture, politics, education, technology, and above all, your own mind. Never before in human history have we had so much knowledge at our fingertips. Literally, we carry in our pocket a library larger than that of Alexandria, a network of knowledge that connects philosophers, scientists, and thinkers from all eras. And yet, why do we feel like we know less and less? The paradox is evident. We are surrounded by information, but we lack wisdom. We consume tons of data, but we find it increasingly difficult to make sense of it. It is like drinking seawater. The more we drink, the thirstier we become. Think about it for a moment. How many times a day do you pick up your phone just to check it for a moment and end up trapped for hours in an endless chain of videos, headlines, and posts that you don't actually remember the next day? How many times do you read a news story just by its headline without stopping to verify what it says or reflect on its context? This is not an accident, it is a design. The platforms we consume are built to keep us hooked, not to make us wiser. Their logic is not truth but attention, and in that system, what is simplest, fastest, and most emotional wins. The complex is relegated, the nuanced is lost, the profound dies. In fact, studies show that our average attention span is lower than it was just a decade ago. And it is not because we are less intelligent, but because we live bombarded by stimuli that train our brain to crave the immediate. We jump from one 15-second video to another, from a meme to a tweet, without ever stopping to reflect. Deep thought becomes a luxury that few are willing to pay for. The irony is that the more we know superficially, the less capable we are of understanding deeply. Knowing thousands of facts does not equal understanding reality. Memory may be full, but consciousness is empty, and this has serious consequences. A society that cannot distinguish between what is true and what is false, between what is important and what is irrelevant, becomes a vulnerable, manipulable, fragile society. Do you realize what this means? We are not living through an information crisis, but an interpretation crisis. We do not lack knowledge, we lack the ability to transform it into wisdom. And if we cannot reverse this, the abundance of information will continue to be our greatest poverty. Why does society choose the superficial over the profound? The answer is not just out there, in the networks or in the media. It is within us, in the way our own mind works. The psychologist Daniel Kahneman, Nobel laureate in economics, explained that we have two systems of thought. The first, fast and intuitive, allows us to react immediately, make instant decisions, survive. The second, slow and reflective, requires effort, energy, and patience. Guess which one we prefer to use most of the time? Exactly, the first one. Our brain is designed to save energy. That is why we prefer quick answers, simple explanations, immediate certainties. The problem is that the world we live in has learned to exploit this weakness. Social media, advertising, politics, all of them are designed to appeal to our System 1, automatic, emotional, impulsive thinking. The result is that we exercise critical thinking less and less. We use deep reasoning less and less. Think about it. What is easier? Reading a philosophy essay that challenges you to question your beliefs, or watching a short video that gives you a pre-packaged opinion in 20 seconds? What is more comfortable? Stopping to analyze complex data, or accepting the first simple explanation that makes you feel good? The majority choose the latter, and little by little, the entire society gets used to thinking less. This is not a coincidence. It is a business. The content that triumphs is not the truest but the most viral. What spreads fastest is not reflection but emotion, and what is emotional is usually simple. Indignation, laughter, fear, they are mental shortcuts that our brain loves, but that make us more manipulable. In fact, MIT studies show that false news spreads faster than true news, precisely because it is designed to hit our emotions. An exciting lie travels further than a boring truth. And in that dynamic, the profound always loses to the superficial. The German philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche warned about the arrival of the last man, a human being who flees effort, who seeks only comfort, who avoids everything that demands thinking or suffering. That last man seems closer every day, because what was once a latent danger is now a lifestyle. Intellectual comfort has become the norm. The worst part is that we get used to it. We are no longer surprised that people argue online about topics they do not understand. With a certainty that is not based on anything, we are no longer impressed to see how an absurd idea becomes a trend while valuable reflections go unnoticed. Superficiality has become normalized, and here is the key point. Stupidity does not arise only from ignorance, but from the voluntary abandonment of thought. It is more comfortable not to question. It is easier to repeat what others say. It is faster to become outraged than to analyze, and the entire society pays the price. But there is something more disturbing. This decline is not an accident. It is a strategy, because the more we think automatically, the easier we are to direct. A population that reacts with quick emotions is much easier to manipulate than one that reflects slowly. The psychological problem becomes a political, cultural, and social problem. The question then is inevitable. What would happen if we decided to resist this trend? What would happen if we started using System 2 more, slow thinking, even if it hurts, even if it is uncomfortable? Perhaps then we would discover that our mind is capable of much more than we believe. But of course, choosing the difficult path is never popular, and this is where the great trap is revealed. What strengthens society is rarely what is most consumed. That is why, if we want to understand collective stupidity, we must first accept this truth. The root lies in how we think, in our psychological weaknesses, and in how the world has learned to exploit them to the fullest. What we are experiencing today did not take the great thinkers of the past by surprise. In fact, many of them had already warned about the danger of a society that chooses comfort over truth, the superficial over the profound. In his theory of the last man, Nietzsche not only described a mediocre human type, but an inevitable consequence of a society that renounces greatness. That being, satisfied with the minimum, represents the triumph of conformism. He no longer dreams, no longer takes risks, no longer seeks to transcend. He prefers safety to risk, comfort to struggle. And with that, humanity itself is impoverished, reduced to a herd that no longer knows how to create or aspire to something superior. Plato also left us a warning over 2,000 years ago. In his allegory of the cave, he described men chained, watching shadows on the wall, and believing those shadows were reality. Today, those shadows do not come from fire, but from screens. We live surrounded by projections, fragments, digital illusions that we confuse with truth. And what happens when someone tries to free themselves and look at the light? Just like in the cave, many reject them, attack them, because the truth hurts more than the comfortable illusion. Neil Postman, in his work Amusing Ourselves to Death, anticipated that the greatest danger to democracy would not be direct censorship, but the trivialization of thought. It would not be a tyrant banning books, but an entire culture that stops reading because it prefers to be entertained. Today we do not need a dictator to take away our freedom. We ourselves give it away in exchange for constant entertainment. Carl Jung, for his part, explained that true human maturity requires confronting the shadow, the contradictions, the uncomfortable. But our current culture is obsessed with the simple, with quick answers, with what avoids any kind of pain. We reject complexity as if it were an enemy, when in reality it is the only path to wisdom. If we look at history, we discover that this pattern repeats itself over and over again. Entire civilizations have fallen not only due to external invasions, but due to their own internal decay. The Roman Empire, for example, ended weakened not only by the barbarians on its borders, but by a society that lulled itself into luxury, spectacle, and easy bread. The famous bread and circuses was not just entertainment. It was a tool of control. A distracted mass does not rebel, does not think, does not create. And what do we have today? A digital version of that bread and circus. Memes, series, short videos. Meaningless controversies that keep us busy while what is important crumbles around us. No one needs to chain us, because we ourselves have chosen the most comfortable chains, those of endless entertainment. Philosophy then becomes a mirror. It shows us that what we are living is not new. It is the same eternal struggle between depth and superficiality, between effort and comfort, between truth and illusion. The difference is that now that struggle occurs on a global scale, amplified by technology and accelerated by immediacy. And here an essential question arises. Do we want to be the guardians of wisdom or the prisoners of shadows? Philosophy does not give easy answers, but it reminds us that the destiny of a society always depends on the quality of its thought. If we let critical thinking die, we also let our freedom die. If we want to understand why society is becoming increasingly stupid, it is not enough to look at individual psychology or philosophical warnings. We must observe how culture, education, and power have shaped this situation. Let us start with education. For centuries, education was conceived as the art of forming the mind, of teaching how to think, of cultivating curiosity. Today, however, in many places it is reduced to memorizing data to pass exams. Schools and universities, trapped in the logic of productivity, prepare students not to understand the world, but to perform on standardized tests. The result is entire generations trained to repeat answers, but incapable of formulating questions. The philosopher John Dewey warned a century ago, "Education is not preparation for life. Education is life itself." However, what we have today is a system that kills creativity and critical thinking in the name of efficiency. To this we add the culture of immediacy. Instead of sages, we now have influencers. Instead of teachers, we celebrate celebrities. Knowledge is no longer measured by the depth of ideas, but by the number of followers or likes. In this world, what is popular is confused with what is true, and the profound is relegated because thinking slowly does not generate clicks. But there is an even more disturbing level: power. Because this trend towards superficiality is not only convenient for digital platforms, but also for those who seek to govern without being questioned. A distracted, divided, and misinformed population is much easier to control. The Roman poet Juvenal summed it up in 2 words: panem et circenses, bread and circuses. Rulers kept the population calm by giving them food and entertainment, while corruption and decay advanced without resistance. Today we live the modern version: unlimited consumption, endless spectacles, manufactured controversies that distract us from real problems. Michel Foucault explained, that modern power does not need to impose itself with explicit violence. It works by shaping what we think, what we desire, what we consider normal. And one of the most effective methods is controlling our attention. Every notification, every trending topic, every wave of outrage is a way to capture our minds so they do not focus on what is essential. In this sense, collective stupidity is not just a cultural accident. It is also a political and economic strategy. The less people think, the more docile they become. The more they are entertained by the trivial, the less energy they have to question injustice. And the more the system divides society into opposing factions, the less capacity there is for united resistance. Thus, culture, education, and power work together, consciously or unconsciously, to create a drowsy society. And the most serious thing is that many do not perceive it, because they believe constant distraction is freedom, when in reality it is the most sophisticated form of slavery. So far we have seen the causes: human psychology, superficial culture, a weakened educational system, and power that benefits from all of this. But the big question is, what are the consequences of this collective stupidity? The first consequence is political. A society incapable of thinking critically is fertile ground for manipulation. Speeches are simplified until they become empty slogans, phrases that excite but explain nothing. Instead of debates, we have spectacles. Instead of reflection, we have tribalism. Politics is reduced to shouting louder than the other, to dividing into sides that no longer dialogue but insult each other. And when reason disappears, democracy weakens. The second consequence is cultural. Superficiality becomes normalized. Influencers who base their success on scandal or exaggeration end up being role models for millions of people. Fame is confused with wisdom, exposure with value. Depth loses appeal because it requires effort, while banality goes viral because it entertains. The third consequence is social. A community that cannot think together loses its ability to build a future. When each person lives trapped in their own bubble of distractions, the sense of the collective erodes. Society fragments into isolated individuals, obsessed with their personal validation, but incapable of cooperating on common projects. And finally, the fourth consequence is personal. Collective stupidity also weakens your individual life. When you accept the noise without questioning it, you renounce your inner freedom. You stop being the master of your mind and become a product of algorithms, propaganda, and what others decide you should think. This is the silent cost. We not only lose quality in institutions or culture, we also lose quality in our own existence. A life without reflection, without depth, without wisdom is a life that slides toward mediocrity without even noticing it. And the most dangerous thing is that many people already accept it as inevitable. But it is not. Decline is not a fixed destiny. It is a choice we make every day as individuals and as a society. At this point, the inevitable question arises: are we condemned to sink into this spiral of collective stupidity, or is there a way to resist? The answer is clear. Yes, there is a way back, but it is not an easy, fast, or popular path. It is a path that demands courage, discipline, and above all, awareness. The first step is to reclaim attention. Our mind is the most valuable resource we have, and yet we give it away to screens as if it were worth nothing. Every time you consciously choose what to consume, instead of letting yourself be dragged by what the algorithm offers you, you are performing an act of resistance. Freedom begins in the way you direct your gaze. The second step is to cultivate slow reflection. In a world that rewards speed, thinking slowly becomes a revolutionary act. Reading an entire book instead of a summary, having a deep conversation instead of an exchange of quick phrases, stopping to write down your ideas instead of just reacting. These habits rebuild the muscle of critical thinking that is now atrophied. The third step is to embrace complexity. Not everything can be reduced to a yes or no, to one side or the other, to a short phrase. Life is ambiguous, contradictory, difficult, and precisely there, in that uncomfortable terrain, true wisdom is born. Rejecting easy answers is rejecting manipulation, The fourth step is to create a conscious community. No one becomes wise in absolute solitude. Philosophy, since Socrates, has always been dialogue. Surround yourself with people who challenge you to think, not just confirm what you already believe. Practice the art of authentic conversation. Listen without prejudice, ask without fear, share without masks. An awakened society can only be born from awakened individuals who dialogue with each other. The fifth step is to recover memory. We cannot allow the past to dissolve in the avalanche of irrelevant novelties. History is not an ornament, it is a severe teacher. Whoever forgets yesterday's mistakes is condemned to repeat them tomorrow. Rediscovering classical thinkers, philosophers, great writers. This is not nostalgia, it is resistance. Finally, the sixth step is to reclaim silence. We live surrounded by noise, but we rarely hear what is essential, our own inner voice. Silence is not emptiness. It is the space where the mind breathes, where the soul finds order, where the deepest ideas can emerge. Kierkegaard warned, "Constant noise distances us from ourselves." Practicing silence is a way to become masters of our own being again. Each of these steps may seem small, almost insignificant, but history shows that great changes always begin with conscious minorities who refuse to live asleep. You do not need the whole society to wake up at once. It is enough that a few people choose to think differently to ignite the spark of change. Wisdom is not a privilege reserved for a few geniuses. It is a possibility within reach of anyone who decides to resist the inertia of mediocrity. And in a world that rewards the superficial, thinking deeply is not only a personal act, it is a political act, an act of freedom. We have traveled an uncomfortable but necessary path. We have seen how society seems to sink deeper each day into superficiality, how the manipulation of attention and constant noise weaken our ability to think, and how this decay benefits those who prefer a distracted and docile people over a critical and conscious one. But here is the most important truth of all. The real danger is not that society becomes more stupid. The real danger is that you accept it as inevitable. Because the moment you lower your head and convince yourself that there is nothing to be done, you are no longer part of the resistance. You are part of the problem. Collective stupidity feeds on individual silence. That is why I want to leave you with a clear idea. You have more power than you think. Not to change the entire world at once, but to change your world, your mind, your environment. And when one person does it, they inspire others to do the same. That is how silent revolutions begin. The ones that do not appear on covers, but transform history from below. True wisdom has never been a majority. Socrates was condemned for making his city uncomfortable. Galileo was silenced for challenging dogmas. Martin Luther King was persecuted for dreaming of a different world. In every era, those who dared to think differently were seen as crazy, dangerous, or uncomfortable. And yet, it was they who lit the torch that later illuminated millions. Today you have to decide. Will you follow the flow of distraction, of the easy, of the comfortable, or will you dare to be different, to cultivate your mind, to think deeply in a world that has almost forgotten what it means to think? Ask yourself, are you feeding your mind or lulling it to sleep? Are you using your time to grow or to dissipate in irrelevance? Are you the master of your attention, or are you giving it away for free to those who profit from your passivity? The choice is yours, and although it may seem small, remember this. Every time you choose reflection over distraction, every time you choose silence over noise, every time you choose truth over comfort, you are strengthening collective intelligence. Do not wait for society to change first so you can change later. Transformation begins with you, here and now. If this message resonated with you, do not let it die in oblivion. Share it, discuss it, reflect on it, and above all, integrate it into your daily life. The next time you feel the temptation to lose yourself in banality, remember that in that instant you are deciding what kind of world you want to live in. The world needs less noise and more clarity, fewer followers and more thinkers, less empty entertainment and more search for truth. If you have made it this far, You have already demonstrated that you are not like the rest, that you have the discipline to listen, to reflect, to go beyond the superficial. That is your greatest capital. Do not waste it. And before ending, I invite you to do something simple but powerful. Subscribe to this channel, like this video, and share it with someone who needs to wake up. It is not just about growing a community. It is about expanding a message that can ignite minds and transform lives. Always remember, collective stupidity only triumphs when individual wisdom surrenders. And as long as there is even one person who dares to think clearly, the future can still be written with intelligence. Choose wisely, because in the end, your mind is your greatest act of freedom.